Here's a quick little tip for testing out if your survey question is actually good. Pretend that you have gotten the data back for the question and that you are going to read aloud a sentence that tells you what you learned. Literally make up fake numbers, X% of people said whatever, but report out the question as if you had data. And if it doesn't make sense, or if it's confusing, or you're oh dang, I can't actually use that, it's a bad question. Here's a little example. So here's a little survey that popped up for me on hotels.com. First question, did this conversation resolve your issue? 80% of people said that this conversation resolved their issue. Okay, that's a good stat, that's helpful. Do I think resolved an issue or a little bit of complicated language I might say in a different way? Sure, but overall, okay, that's good. But let's look at the next question they asked. Based on this conversation, how likely are you to recommend hotels.com to a friend, relative, or colleague? Let's say 70% of people said on a scale from 0 to 10, they were an 8 likely to recommend hotels.com to a friend, relative, or colleague based on the conversation they had with support. Other than that conversation, how likely are they to recommend hotels.com? Did their rating go up or down based on this conversation? We don't know any of those things based on this survey. All you can share out is based on this one conversation, how likely I am to recommend hotels.com. I'm not even sure people are only going to be able to think of this in response to just this conversation. My conversation was not helpful. Based on just that conversation, I'm not likely to recommend hotels.com. However, generally, I am likely to recommend it. I'm probably an 8 or a 9. You wouldn't know that based on this question, which brings me back to the original thought. What is it that you actually want to be able to share out? Do you really only care about how many people would recommend your website based on one conversation? Really? With no point of comparison, just that one conversation, you care about that one rating based on that one conversation. If so, okay, this question is for you. If not, if what you actually want to be able to share, actually want to be able to use to make decisions is whether that conversation experience made me more or less likely to recommend you, or inclusive of all my experiences with your website, with your customer service representatives, how likely I am to recommend you, then that's not the right question for you. The purpose of your survey, what you want to be able to say, to share, to do because of your survey, that is the most important thing in guiding what your question is. So think about that. And again, test it out. If you have a question, be okay, well, this is what I'd be able to share or say based on this question. If that's not actually what you care about, write a different question.